Please help me welcome Team Lead.
Boy, I didn't realize I'd be set up to have an opportunity to run counter-arguments to Ted Sarandos. That's not what I prepared, but I'm really regretting that opportunity. There was an article that came out on Twitch Film about 5 reasons to be excited about coming to the Film Independent Forum. And one of them, he said, was my speech. And he said, literally, this will be the very first time that I will see Tim League address an audience without a beer in his hand. And so, I want to ruin his opportunities to say that. So I went to the minibar beforehand and got a beer. So, not on my watch. So anyway, I can stop anytime. It's not a problem or anything. But yes, I'm the CEO, founder of Alamo Drafthouse, and actually, originally I was going to be speaking about the Alamo Drafthouse, and I prepared a presentation, and on the flight over, I realized that the audience, that's maybe not what you guys would find interesting, so I completely scrapped it, and spent yesterday rewriting this talk, so it might be awful, and at least you'll know that I put no more than 24 hours worth of effort into this keynote address. So I really want to talk about distribution and the creator. I'm assuming that the audience today is a lot of people in the film industry that are actually creating content. And maybe you have some questions about distribution, what's happening. So I'm going to try to impart some advice. I have limited advice. We've been in the distribution game for 3 years. And it's been a crazy 3 years. But the very, very first thing that you really have to know about all distributors is that we are all just blood-sucking freaks, and we're awful and almost nearly criminal in our relationship with filmmakers. So, furthermore, this really is a wild, wild west time. So if you're talking to distributors and they somehow say, yes, this is what it's going to be like in 5 years, they are absolutely lying to you. Nobody really knows anything about what's going on. We're just sort of holding on by the reins as hard as we can. So that's the harsh reality. It's a really, really tough business, and there's some real assholes out there. So beware. And so I'm gonna address some of the pitfalls. So this might be bad news, but here's the worst news for you guys, the sad clowns who are making film. They're not really sad clowns, but you need us. You need the blood-sucking freaks, unfortunately. There are anecdotal situations out there where people have successfully self-distributed films, but they are very much anecdotal. I'm going to talk about a little bit of those and some of the tools that are available, but the harsh reality is you need the blood-sucking freaks, so I apologize. So this is the inspiration for this keynote. As I travel, as most every self-respecting citizen does, I open up the Sky Mall catalog as soon as I sit in my seat. And I found this really interesting new product called Get Abstract. And what they've done is they've taken 100 business self-help books and they've compressed them into 5-page PDFs that are available on the iPad and the iPhone. So if you don't have time to read 100 books, then you can read 100 5-page PDFs and glean every bit of information you need to know about being successful in business. So I said, okay, well, I have about 45 minutes here today. Why don't I distill some of these books and some of these learnings, some of these white papers about distribution, and go even further, not 5-page PDFs, but just like PowerPoint slides. Each one will get like 1 PowerPoint slide or 2. So that's sort of that's the inspiration of the alleged wisdom I'm about to impart. And so one of these books is from this guy. I don't know if you've ever. Has anybody in the room ever read the book 7 Habits for Highly Successful People? Yeah, so this is Stephen Covey, and I've actually, this is his book, 7 Habits for Highly Effective People. 15 million copies sold, 38 languages. And I've actually read this book, strangely enough. I didn't really like it that much. So it kind of goes back to the very beginning. I read this book within a month of this picture being taken. So before I was in the film business, I was in what somebody earlier today called the energy business. I was in the big oil business for a couple of years as an engineer for Shell. I won't go into it in detail, but it was, you're good at math when you're in high school, you take this track and you just end up studying something like engineering, and before you know it, you're done with college, and then you apply for jobs, you don't think about it, and then all of a sudden you're working for big oil. And there's aspects of it that I liked, but I was frankly a pretty terrible engineer and was immediately looking for an exit strategy. And that's, my exit strategy was getting into the movie business. But that's the other talk. I'm not going to talk about that. What's important here is I read 7 Habits for Highly Effective People, and they gave me a new Stephen Covey day timer. I was supposed to use the philosophies of his religion, if you will, to organize my life at Shell. And nobody was really that into it. But I did think, if this guy can write a book, and I didn't think it was a great book, then maybe today this keynote address is the beginning of my own publishing career. So you guys are getting the first shot at what could be an international bestseller. So this morning I took my publicity photo in my hotel room. I should have worn a shirt. I realize now. So. But I got it more or less, and then I also designed my book cover. So today, the topic today is Tim League's mega awesome distribution strategies. So there we go, and I'll start just so I can throw this slide up one more time. Stephen Covey. So you think about, for those who haven't read the book, there's actually one that I'm going to pluck out of the Stephen Covey's world that I think is apropos for film distribution. So here's all of them. You got the highly successful, I think I keep on getting that word wrong. Be proactive, begin with the end in mind, put first things first, think win-win, seek first to understand, then to understand, synergize and sharpen the saw. So that's the 7 habits. I love that phrase, sharpen the saw. I actually use that at cocktail parties. So I like to sharpen the saw, if you will. So cheers. So. But begin with the end in mind. In all seriousness, you have come to the very first Tim League's mega awesome distribution strategy. So before you make your movie, figure out who the hell your audience is for the movie. You can create whatever you want to, but the very harsh reality about distribution right now is that there are a very slender few movies that get distributed. So this is an imprecise number. People sort of try to get a handle on it worldwide, how many people have made a movie and expect it to get some level of distribution. So it's about 50,000 movies are made every year. A very slender percentage of 1% ever make money off of those movies. So if you can make whatever you want to make, but a part of your strategy is actually to make money off of what you're making. If you consider there's some investment component to this filmmaking, then there's a couple of strategies that might get you a little closer. Star power will get you there. If you happen to know, Luke Wilson or Robert De Niro, that's a great way to make money in your film. That's a very small percentage of the population. But these genres have a much higher rate of financial success without star power. So thinking within the genres of horror and science fiction and documentary, those are the ones that get bought out of festivals. Those are the ones that get pretty decent play on VOD and online. And documentary is the odd man out because that's a little bit of a different strategy. It's finding an audience through niche promotion. So to sort of summarize that in another Tim League mega awesome distribution strategy, so increase your odds of financial success, convince a name actor or actress to be in your film, or make a solid horror or science fiction film. And so I'm going to go a little bit deeper into this idea of a name actor. And I've got 2 strategies from polar opposites. The first one is, not that Taron Egerton is everybody's like the it guy, but if you read the trades, there's everybody in this industry loves to handicap. They love to think, okay, these are going to be the new rising stars. Like if you just say rising star Hollywood 2014, you get about 20 articles of people's conjecture as to who's going to be the next Ben Affleck or whoever. So there's a guy that almost scored the lead in the new Star Wars film, but he's also he's playing against Colin Firth in The Kingsman, which is opening up soon. So somebody like that, if you catch them before these movies come out, you sort of court them by getting your material, provided your material is engaging and interesting, which I'm not even going to go into that. That's really the first step. But if you have an engaging script or an engaging project, and then these folks, they're in this game, they're about to blow up, great. Make your movie, wait for them to blow up, voila, success. The other end of the spectrum is going to the American film market, which is happening in November. And so if you have access to the market, you can see all manner of films that are out there, and an interesting game to play. And there's nothing against Danny Glover, but it is odd to me that I walk through the American film market and I see a movie where Danny Glover is looking really just tired and sad that he is in a movie called Age of the Dragons with Vinnie Jones. And so this, to me, is an indicator of possibly a lot of things. Maybe, and again, I say these things, and I apologize in advance if I'm offending anybody in the audience, but maybe he needs new management, and maybe he is ripe for a career resurgence project. I doubt that he was paid a huge amount of money for this movie. This movie actually probably did make money. That's another way that you can, he's following my strategy to a T. Whoever made this movie, they have found a name actor and they've made this movie. Unfortunately, this movie is really hard to get 9% on Rotten Tomatoes. And I sort of like this review. When the dystopian future envisioned in Blade Runner finally comes to fruition, Age of Dragons will be used to distinguish humans from replicants, because if you are not in teary despair by the film's end, you probably are not human. I'm just saying, maybe it's time for the old Robert Forster treatment on Danny Glover. So just if that happens for one of your projects, I would like at least a congratulatory email once you become a multimillionaire. So anyway, I think the man's got it in him. I think anyway. So just go out of curiosity, scan the aisles of the American film market. It's a very interesting depiction of what this industry is on one level. On to the next book and mega awesome strategy. This is a pretty interesting book. I've also read this book by Mark Schaefer, talking about clout and influence in social media. And probably a lot of people tell you this, but it is really, really important, especially when you're just getting into this business, is to always try to develop yourself as a brand. It's going to come in very, very handy. Just try to engage in social media. Try to build your audience wherever you can. So let's say you're in a room full of strangers, then maybe just throw out what your Twitter handles are, or where people can find you on Instagram. You can also there's a trick like, what I could theoretically say, and this actually isn't theoretical. So if you follow Draft House LA today, then I'll invite you to the grand opening of the Draft House in downtown. So you could do some sort of pandering, cheap tactic like that whenever you have a captive audience, and you can sort of inherently increase your following. So to sort of summarize that in another slide, exploit any opportunity to gain social media followers. That's just a theoretical example, I say. But the problem is, if you start following me, Tim Alamo, on Twitter, you're unfortunately not going to get all that good information, I suppose. You get mostly pictures of me and my daughters. Those are my little 3-year-old girls. There's beers that I've been drinking, and then tacos I've been eating, and then my hobbies. And so I was unsure whether I should put this slide in there. And this is what I did with my day yesterday when I wasn't writing this PowerPoint presentation. This is the star of our upcoming film, R100, which is a bondage and S&M themed film. This really isn't my hobby. It was really quite terrifying. So anyway, you'll see this video pop up. I haven't told my wife about this yet. That's how I spent my day yesterday. So anyway, this is the movie R100, comes out in theaters, and we're actually doing this very targeted niche curation into the bondage and S&M scene. It's a Japanese comedy too. It's fine. It's totally good. It's not that weird, but it's pretty weird. So since I've sort of humiliated myself on slides, I wanted to go ahead and humiliate a name actor in Hollywood here. But I use him as an interesting example. This is the actor Pat Healy, and I think that he really understands this space. So if you follow Pat_Healy on Twitter, you'll get a really interesting stream of information. He's a very funny guy. He's an emerging actor. He's a great actor. And I think he's one of those guys, if you look at his trajectory, he's on the rise. He's getting these bit parts he had a part in Captain America, very small part, but he's also doing these really great curated independent films. So he was in Compliance. He was also in Cheap Thrills for us. And so it leads me to a little bit of a strategy that we use. We release pretty small films. We release 12 films a year at max, but it's only films that we love. And so Pat Healy, we convinced him to take part in this Share to Dare campaign. So if you put the hashtag of Cheap Thrills on social media, with every one, we had all these dares that got unlocked, and one of the third or fourth one was Pat Healy posing as Burt Reynolds. So you kind of, ooh, it's not bad. And so what's unfortunate for Pat is now, he's an actor in this town, and so if you search for Pat Healy and you're a producer, you're probably going to end up with this photo. So I apologize. He's sort of a yin-yang situation with that fear dispelling, boon bestowing. But anyway, this is just a screen grab of that. So what we like to do, because we don't have a lot of huge name actors, we come up with interesting social media activations that can get people talking and tweeting and sharing with their friends. And Twitter's a really great sort of funnel because Facebook is actively throttling back which of your friends and followers actually see your posts. It's down to like 15% actually, especially if you're a company. So you have to pay to get access to the fans that you built up, which is it's not so cool. But Twitter is not that way. So I actually prefer Twitter as an engine for this type of thing, because if you get tagged on a post and then it goes to all of your followers and all of their followers. So getting something that's nice and sticky like this, like Pat Healy with no clothes on doing a little weird tuck thing, is that's called good social media. I'll talk a little bit about clout when it comes to the theater chain, because I'm mostly going to be talking about film distribution, but we're very active in the space for the theater. We measure this on a daily basis to see how we're doing, how our engagement is, how good our content is. So this is a snapshot in time from a couple of weeks ago of where we are with our competitors. We're different than everybody else on this list in that we go by market. So we're in 10 different markets across the country. We have 19 theaters, but the social media is handled locally. So for Alamo Austin, we have the same clout score, which is an aggregator of really the effectiveness of your Twitter and your Facebook combined into one number. But Cinemark USA constitutes just over 4,000 screens. Alamo Austin rather constitutes 33 screens. So it's just sort of a measure of the effectiveness. And so the basics on that is making sure the content is strong and the conversations are real. And what's interesting about that is you can't really do that on a national basis, because the people that you're talking to in New York or California are different than the people and the sensibilities and the movies that you're talking about in Austin. So it doesn't end up it's a one-way conversation if you do it nationally. It becomes a two-way conversation if you do it locally. Oh, also, you can find out more information about Draft House Films on Twitter at Draft House Films. Okay, here's another promotion that we did for a documentary, as a music documentary about this punk rock band called Death. If I do say so myself, it's a really good film. So the basic premise of this movie is that these guys in the 1970s had a punk band. They're three black brothers from Detroit. They were playing music in the early 70s, and they were playing punk music 2 years before the Sex Pistols, 2 years before the Ramones, and they never made it. They just disappeared after about 1978, and then about 20 years later, about 30 years later, one of his sons was at a party and was listening to the radio, and there's somebody just playing some punk rock music. His son was now into punk rock and the skate scene here in LA, and says, "That's my dad's voice. I know that's my dad's voice." And it was this underground track that had been circulated from these super rare 45s. So he calls his dad and he's like, "Dad, were you in a band called Death?" And there's like silence, and Dad's like, "Yeah." And so the story is about the resurgence of this band Death. They got the tapes back, but blah, blah, blah. So we put together this Tumblr because we thought there's maybe a more universal story in there of like sons and daughters realizing that their dads were in a band in high school or college. And so we scoured all of our friends and all of our friends' friends, and we got about 150 dad bands. And so we got photographs and MP3s, and then had the son or daughter write a story about how they found out. and what it means to them that their dad was in a band. And so this is one of the bands. Here's another one. And then we augmented it with some celebrities. So we got like Dee Snider's son talking about what it's like to have a dad like Dee Snider. And this is all 3 months before the release of the film. We had no branding for a band called Death. And then a week or two before the release of the film, we dropped this one, which is Bobby Hacker, which is one of the sons, the son that actually listened to his dad's band at the party, talk about what it meant for him to realize that his father was in this really intensely amazing band that nobody knew about. And so at that point, we kind of turned the switch and turned it into our official band called Death site. And it's all based around Tumblr. And so it was great, got lots of good editorial coverage. And basically we found an interesting story to create shareable social media around in a tangential way. And I think the documentary space is really unique to that because you can find opportunities to do that. We're going to switch gears really quick, but this is also very potent advice. Get a sales agent. And so I think a lot of people, you make a film, and like, well, I could save the money. I don't have to pay an agent, whatever it is, 10, 15% for whatever I make on this film. I'm going to do those deals. And I think if you recall, to the very beginning of this conversation, I mentioned the fact that all distributors are blood-sucking freaks and borderline criminals. So if they sense blood in the water, if they sense weakness, if they sense unpreparedness, if they sense ignorance, they will exploit, they meaning me. I don't know, not me, but the other guys. You run a very, very serious risk of getting into something that you don't fully understand. And I think that 10% is worth it in terms of access, credibility, and just sheer safety. So the problem is, if no sales agent wants to sell your film, you're probably not going to sell your film. And it goes back to that 50,000 movies, less than 1%. It's a tough business, and not all films are sellable. And I think the sales agents are doing the exact same thing that the distributors are. So when I go into a market, we go to Sundance, we go to Cannes, we go to Toronto, we go to a variety of other festivals, and we're looking for films. We watch the films. First order of business, do we like it? Do we love this film? Second order of business, is there any conceivable way that we can find an audience for this film? So I'm doing the same thing that you should be doing at the beginning, is like define your audience and know your audience. The sales agents are going to do the same thing. It's like, do I like this film? Do I think there's any conceivable way that there's going to be a buyer for this film? And is it worth my time as a sales agent to take this on? Because I can only represent X number of films a year. So sorry for the harsh advice, but that's sad but true. I'm getting all sad. I'm going to go to a new slide. Yes, if you don't have a sales agent and try to negotiate your own deal, odds are you will be extremely violated, or you will experience violation. I can't stress it enough. You should do it, especially if you get into a premiere festival. What's interesting about that situation, if you get into Sundance, people will be knocking on your door. That's the day that Sundance comes out. All the sales agents are looking at it and then immediately making calls, trying to figure out how they can get these films signed up. Because there's a good hit ratio out of Sundance, even though it's not great. I don't know what the actual ratio is, but it's certainly not 100%. Okay, I guess I switched gears a lot here. This is the new gear. Another thing you can possibly do is you can move to New Zealand. So I say that because something very interesting has just happened. It's just in this past month. And I mentioned that this is an industry of the Wild West, so things are changing all the time. Clearly, Kickstarter and Indiegogo, any type of crowdfunding is now a part of our DNA in terms of independent film, and a lot of folks are doing it with great success. The problem is, what are you actually offering? You're offering sort of a pre-sale. You're getting a T-shirt out of the deal. You're getting your name in the credits. You're getting a feel-good factor. You're getting a DVD. You get invited to the premiere. All these things. Okay, those are fine. But this guy, Lee Tamahori, has actually changed that, and there's several countries now that have done it, and it's equity crowdfunding. It's something that the big guys here, Indiegogo and Kickstarter, have been trying to do, try to make legal in the States since their inception. They see the power of this, but New Zealand has cut through the red tape, and they've actually done it. So Lee Tamahori's new film, Bulibasha needed $500,000 in bridge financing. It's one of those rare mid-budget films now. It's a $6 to $8 million film. But in order to greenlight the film, they needed an additional $500,000, and they were able to raise it from Snowball. And so Snowball, it's only effective now for projects in New Zealand, but I suspect, using the crystal ball that seems pretty obvious, is that we're going to figure this out in the States. So you don't actually have to move to New Zealand unless you want to make your film right now and you want to crowdfund it. But it's a $1 per share investment, and you get in with the first equity investors, so you're getting paid back first before anybody else does. Very, very simple, very, very clean, minimum investment of $100, and you actually are getting a piece of the action. And that's where I think crowdfunding could be really, really fantastic. So this is more a look forward that hopefully we can cut through the legal red tape in the United States and make this a possibility, because I think that becomes just a much more interesting game. Just don't let on to people that a tiny fraction of 1% of films actually make money. You don't want to put that in your deck when you're trying to crowdfund. So yours will be different. So yes, equity crowdfunding is coming. My next mega awesome strategy is experiment and be open to new concepts. We're very much in this space at Drafthouse Films. We try out everything, and some of them work and some of them don't. I'm going to talk a little bit about ones that I think are working and I think have some interesting potential to work even better as the months go by. The first one is Vimeo. So we put our entire catalog on Vimeo. And these are, transactional. These are all the films that are available for electronic download. So everything in our whole catalog is here, and as we get new ones, we put them up on here. There's lots of outlets for this, so it's not like it's that aspect of it is that amazing. But what I really like what Vimeo has done is we can take the trailers for a film. If we do our initial press release and we put those trailers out and we give a Vimeo link to the websites that embed that Vimeo link onto their sites, when it comes to be the electronic transactional window where we can actually monetize these films online, we can actually tweak that trailer. So we can put the transaction into the trailer space. So you watch the trailer and the thing that immediately pops up is like, would you like to buy this movie? So it's sort of, if you have your account set up, it's a one-click purchase after you have watched that trailer. And I'm sure that that's going to be the case with YouTube and a lot of other channels. But Vimeo seemed to have gotten to it first and has a pretty good user interface on it. And I just like that idea that we've got advertisements for our film in one window where it's just, hey, check this out. This movie's coming out in a few months. You're going to want to see it and remember it. But then those live on the internet forever. And so if somebody goes to one of our movies, like A Band Called Death, had we set it up properly in the beginning. But from here on forward, they come to that, so now it'll be a transactional space. So it's just another storefront that we can activate for the entire life of the film. So I think that's a really cool space. And I think it's indicative of the way that there's a lot of companies and a lot of money being spent to keep pace with new ways of transacting with people in the online space. So it really means that as a distributor and actually as a filmmaker, just keeping pace with all these things, like paying attention to what happens with the industry. Then there's these guys. Say what you will. There's just an interesting debate raging around about BitTorrent. BitTorrent wants to position themselves as the software client that allows for their type of downloads and to distance themselves from the vast 99.9999% of the use of BitTorrent, which is to steal our creative work. However, I have to admire that they're trying to rebrand and reinvent themselves and to distance themselves from the pirate bays. It's a little bit complicated. I'm not going to get into the nuances of how BitTorrent actually works, but they have introduced these BitTorrent bundles, and as of last month, they introduced the first BitTorrent Paygate bundle. So we started using them for our films, and it's more of a PR and awareness type of strategy. So we first did it with The Act of Killing. This is a documentary that was nominated for Best Documentary at the Academy Awards last year. It did not win. I don't know if you saw that show, but that didn't win. It was also nominated for a Spirit Award. Didn't win. But Anyway, but it was a vast honor to be nominated in the first place. But one of the things we were doing with this, and one of the goals of the filmmaker, he's a brilliant filmmaker, and at his core, he doesn't really care about the awards and the accolades, except that it raises the awareness of the film and the issues of the film. So everything that we could do just to spread worldwide awareness of the genocide in Indonesia in 1965, he was into. And so we put together a bundle, which basically means it had the trailer, a lot of exclusive extras that we built for BitTorrent, anything that we could package together in a document form, whether it's video, whether it's a PDF. And we bundled it together, and then we put it out on BitTorrent, and they promoted it heavily through their sales channels. And so that free bundle didn't have the film in it, but it had a lot of information and context about the film, and some calls to action about how you can get involved and what's the next steps for this issue. So worldwide, 3.5 million downloads. We had basically a link to go to iTunes so you could potentially transact with the film. I don't have the data on how many of those impressions turned into transactions. It wasn't that many, but we did feel a blip after this went out, and so that's good, I suppose. And then there were 45,000 downloads in Indonesia itself, which is great. And then we also harvested 52,000 emails. And so those are ours. We can promote to those people, and there's an inherent value in every email address you get. A lot of those are international, so if you take it down to the US, it probably constitutes maybe 5,000 emails for us, but that's still good. We're going to promote to them when Josh's new film, The Look of Silence, comes out next year. It continues, it's sort of a companion piece to the act of killing. But then they did this. I referenced this. This is the Paygate bundle. So this is Tom York's new album, and for a month it was distributed exclusively on BitTorrent. So it was available nowhere else. And the way it worked is there was a free bundle where you got the first 3 songs and a music video, and then if you wanted to buy the whole album, it was $6. And it was a Paygate transactional, really easy process. So once you unlocked the Paygate, a new torrent became available that had the entire album on it. And so they're being very coy. I've been pushing them to get the actual numbers. And neither Tom York's side nor BitTorrent are saying what it is. But the actual, combined torrents, you can kind of measure that, have been downloaded about 1 million times. And estimates, the handicappers, as we so often find in this industry, are estimating it's probably about 500,000 downloads at $6 a piece through BitTorrent, which would make this a pretty good success. And so we're pushing to release our films on a Paygate at the same time we do the electronic. We're probably not going to go exclusive with BitTorrent, but when it's available on iTunes, we're going to try out the BitTorrent bundle and get some real data to see how it works in the film space. The other sort of new technology that this is not that new, but if you don't know about it, you should check it out. It's an Amazon company called CreateSpace, and it basically, with very, very little effort, it allows you to get your film on a DVD burn on demand, and also on their Amazon Instant Streaming. And so that's a tool that's just available to anybody. And there's a lot of tools in distribution where they're only available to the distributors. Like, you're not going to be able to get your film on VOD. You need a distributor or an aggregator to do that. And that's where a good sales agent can get you that deal exclusively, or you have to get a distributor that has access and relationships to that. But if you want to get it on Amazon, if you don't find a distribution deal and you want to start with your self-promotion efforts, then CreateSpace is a really interesting tool. And it kind of leads me into Indie Game the Movie. This is, if you've been to any of these types of forums over the last couple of years, I would hope that this has come up. And I'll just talk about it a little bit because, so these guys had a documentary, played at Sundance a couple of years ago, and they were weighing options. They did have a sales agent. I think they were with the Film Sales Company, which is a really, really great, I think, progressive-minded sales agent. So they were going to weigh the options out of Sundance, but they also knew in their hip pocket that they were going to potentially distribute the film themselves. And so you can potentially do this, but it takes a lot of factors to make it work. And so this is a big slide, should have broken that up maybe a little bit. So self-distribution relies on a variety of things. Niche subject material. Indie Game the Movie already has the indie video game development world is really active online. They're a great community, and the filmmakers worked hard to already tap into that audience. So they knew they had niche subject material and access to audience. But they also became experts on marketing and distribution. And I honestly think that every filmmaker should become, in your side, as your pastime, an expert in marketing and distribution. It's going to serve you well because you're a big part of the marketing and distribution strategy, even if you get a distributor. But if you don't, you have to be able to compete with the best. Having a worldwide audience, which certainly the indie game community is a worldwide audience, and distributing films worldwide is the way to go in the electronic and online space. Early and active constant audience engagement. These guys worked, and I'll show you some slides as to the amount of effort that they put into this, but it started before they did the film. They did a Kickstarter campaign and were very successful with that, and that engagement started there, and they didn't stop, for about 3 years as they're working on this film to build that audience. And it's thousands and thousands and thousands of hours. So I'm going to distill it with just a couple of slides, some of the key points of their white paper, their case study, and you can see that at Indie Game the Movie. And also, if you do that, you can get 50% off the download of the movie on VHX, which is a DRM-free platform that we also use at Drafthouse Films. A great online distribution platform. And it was the key platform for Indie Game the Movie, the release. So this is just some of the things that they did. Indie Game the Movie related emails, 10,000, 14,000 tweets about Indie Game the Movie. That's a huge amount of work. 14,000. I've been on Twitter for a long time. I doubt that I've done 14,000 updates. And this is sort of a breakdown as to the amount of time, both from a percentage and a number of days that it took them. So the actual producing and directing was about half of the time involved with the movie. And so all the other things, social media, distribution and social media, and web content production, all these things just really add up and stayed part of their job as they distributed this film. So summing it up, with a distributor or without, become an expert at PR and marketing. So I wanted to save a decent amount of time for questions afterwards, so I'm just going to wrap it up. So this is the conclusion, if you will. So all distributors, myself very much included, are just making it up as we go along. But this really applies to everybody. This is a rapidly changing landscape, and young people are engaging with content much differently than old geezers like myself. You can self-distribute, but it's hard work, but it is possible. And this is a really crappy business. I don't know why we've all gotten into it. It's hard. It's really hard, but it's very rewarding. I still get incredibly excited every time I see a film that just blows me out of the water. So even though it's a crappy business, it's an awesome business. So good luck to everybody, and don't give up. Just keep on making awesome films. So that's it. I should mention, in a couple hours probably, I'll put these set of slides up on SlideShare. So if you want to reference all those mega awesome distribution tips, you're welcome to view or download that. So anyway, that's what I got. Anybody have any questions for me?
Yeah, first cross right in the front. I think it's really cutting edge and brilliant, the use of BitTorrent to distribute your movies, but aren't you a little concerned that the people that do that are going to take your movie and immediately post it up on Pirate Bay or anything like that?
Well, unfortunately, the very second a movie is available in any digital format on any platform on any device, within that same day it's going to be up on BitTorrent. So you can fight the fight on BitTorrent. You can try to take those torrents down. But we're DRM free, which means it doesn't have the protection. But I mean, I'm not even that tech savvy. There's not a movie out there that I can't steal if I wanted to. I mean, there's some really great tools out there for thieves and criminals. And so they've all got them, so there's no way to protect yourself against it. So I just choose to fight a different battle. It's going to happen. So the movies are going to end up on BitTorrent, and frankly, it pisses me off, right? And there's ways that it can be drastically stopped. I mean, it's not to get on that stump, but it's really up to the Googles and Yahoos of the world. I mean, they can make it extremely hard for torrent files to be made available, which will just drive the hardcore community to have third-party browsing software. But that just immediately shrinks the potential audience for it. So it's become more mainstream, and it really sucks. And I think it's the big guys that have to take it down. I'm defenseless. I can't do that. I'm just pissed off at it. But despite the fact that I'm pissed off, I see that there's a potential audience out there, and if I can convert 2% of the illegal BitTorrent folks to transact with the movie, to engage with the brand and feel like a relationship with our brand, to support us for what we're doing, then I'm going to call that a victory in a really screwed up space. So.
Hey Tim, thanks so much for a really informative talk. My question has to do with shorts distribution. Do you see a future in shorts distribution and what that may be?
I mean, it's a lot harder to distribute shorts. We've done a little bit of it. So the two things that we've done, we produced a film called ABCs of Death and the sequel ABCs of Death 2, which is on VOD now in theaters on October 31st, which is ostensibly a shorts compilation. So it's 26 filmmakers, each assigned a letter of the alphabet, death every 4 minutes. And so it's all emerging genre filmmakers from across the world. And so that, in a sense, is a shorts compilation just bundled together. We produce a genre film festival in September called Fantastic Fest, and this year we released a collection of the short films of Nacho Vigalondo, who's been he world premiered his first feature with us. He's had all of his films at the festival. It's not selling that well. It's really niche. We all knew it going into it. We entered into an agreement with him where there was no MG or minimum guarantee, as they say, and it was just a straight a split announcement. We capped expenses really, really, really tight on it, so hopefully we can still deliver back some money to him. But we all knew, it's limited returns. It's possible. I mean, you look at one interesting space right now is GoPro, I think, in that they just went public, and they went public not as a camera company, they went public as a media company, and so they haven't necessarily built that media company, but it does mean that they're probably going to be funding content development, and it might be in the short space. I mean, I would think that there may be eventually, just given that the tastes of people watching online, they're watching more short content. You've certainly seen individual short filmmakers who have put together a really sticky, viral short, and you engage the ad network at the beginning, and you can take all that ad revenue, and it's more in the space of like, this is sorry to kind of ramble on this, but I got invited to this weird kind of Twitter party in Austin with a brand that was coming to Austin that wanted some influencers. And so I got invited to this, and they would pay for our drinks and our food if we sent out a few tweets. So I'm a whore, I don't know. Just for, buy me a drink and I'm yours. But a lot of the influencers with these, like there was two of these guys that were juniors at UT in college. They're like 19, 20 years old, and they have a really, really big YouTube channel. And those guys are making some pretty good money by creating short-form content. It might not be what we think is short films per se, but that's probably the way to bypass all of us crusty, awful middlemen and go straight from, like that's the ideal, right? Is to go straight from creator to consuming, monetizing public. And so that's all built upon building a brand, whether that's a YouTube channel or a big social media following.
Cool. So if you were here in the middle, if you're trying to create financial comps for a movie's success, right? We have Box Office Mojo to track theatrical success, but is there any equivalent for the online space to see how movies are doing digitally?
Strangely, Box Office Mojo is built upon this company called Rentrack. That's where all the theatrical data is. And it's a strange sort of happy accident that all that information is as public as it is. And a lot of distributors don't actually like it. You'll notice you'll never get any information about Netflix. Even me, I don't get it. So we sell a movie to Netflix, we make the case, we try to get as big of a price tag as possible from them, and then the deal that generally works with Netflix, I think this is across the board, is you get a lump sum. It's spread out over 8 payments over 2 years, and that's all you ever get from Netflix. You sell it to them for a certain window, whether it's 2 years, 5 years, 1 year, 6 months, whatever it is, and you get X number of dollars. And we'll ask and say, how's it doing? And the 2 answers that you get are, well, it's underperforming, or it's doing pretty well. That's all the data I have. So, and so I think the distributors just don't want you to have that information. So VOD, everybody's being a little coy. The numbers that get reported out of VOD are only the success stories. You have a few people that are reporting sort of the moderate numbers. John Sloss has been pretty good about reporting numbers because he wants that to break. He wants that data to be public. Tom Quinn at Radius has been pretty decent about it. A success, you hear about the bachelorettes, that make $6 million on VOD, and it's like, oh, everything's rosy. A success generally on the VOD space is making about $100 grand. So that's a successful title in the VOD space. Some make a lot more, some just break out and do a lot more. But there's plenty that do about, $20,000, $25,000, a lot of them. So it's not this magic arrow. I'm not sure I got the question. Was that enough of an answer? Okay. The data's hard to find and the distributors don't want you to have it. So if you sell a movie to a distributor, they're obligated to give you all the data that they have. You sometimes have to pry it out of their claws.
Hey, Tim, over here.
Hello.
Hey, I was curious, you guys as a distributor are in a unique position because you guys actually own your theatrical component and you can kind of marry that with your VOD release in a sort of strategic fashion, which is, I think, unique to you guys. But I was wondering for you guys, and looking at your kind of title of films, it looks like it's the kind of films that often aren't like the #1 film out of Sundance, but it's the kind of film that maybe a Fox Searchlight's not going to take a gamble on and put $10, $20 million of marketing support behind. But for the smaller kind of indies, what are you guys seeing as kind of a breakdown of like what's a good spend for you guys in terms of P&A, or maybe that's all just promotion or all publicity and no real actual prints?
Yeah.
And then like what kind of returns are you guys seeing from like kind of an average amount on your films, and are you guys finding that you're like breaking even, or if you guys didn't have the theatrical component, would you even be able to break even without your kind of theaters as attached to that?
Okay, there's a lot of questions here.
Sorry,
So, yeah, I'm self-funding the distribution company, which is probably not a real wise move. And so, if a movie approaches like a $750,000 minimum guarantee, then I tap out. Like, I can't do it. I can't write that check. And so we're looking we usually pay for a minimum guarantee. We pay anywhere from $0 to about $500,000. And it depends on the film. And so what we do, we'll go to Sundance, we'll see a film. The Nick Cave doc is an interesting example. The 20,000 Days on Earth was a wonderful film. You should all go monetize and check that out. So we just put a financial model together. Immediately after loving the film, we actually have a spreadsheet where we estimate what we're going to get off of all the platforms, and then what we can afford to spend for a P&A budget for the film. And then it's just, it's high stakes poker at that point. You find comp titles that you know about. We have access to a little bit of data. We have access to home video sales numbers. So if we say, okay, well, this movie is sort of like this movie meets this movie. These movies sold this number of units in Walmart, so we think we're going to sell this many, blah, blah, blah. We think the theatrical potential is this. And then we pitch the sales agent on our strategy. So it's a combination of the money up front, which is certainly the most important, and then the strategy of how we're going to position it and where we're going to go with the film. So I told you my MG range, $0 to $500,000. We generally spend about, and again, it's wildly different films, $50,000 to $300,000 on P&A budget, which is relatively small, but that's just the world we're in. We can't afford, given the niche subject material that we generally distribute, to spend much more than that. That may change, like we might want to go after bigger films. I think we're always going to have a certain component of foreign language films, a certain component of documentaries, and a certain component of just films we absolutely love, but it'd be nice to have the potential for more breakout movies that approach the Sony Classics, Fox Searchlight world, but on a slightly lower budget. Was that all of them? Is there anything still outstanding for? Oh, theatrical. You never make any money on theatrical. So it's just costs a lot of money to market and promote. Even owning our own theaters, like we can actually make a little bit of money on the Alamo Drafthouse locations. We have 19. We play all the Drafthouse Films titles in all the markets. And there's actually a court case in 1948, United States government versus Paramount, which defined this activity to be somewhat illegal, this sort of vertical integration of companies. But we're not really thinking about that right now. But the problem in 1948 was that you would exclusively play Paramount movies in Paramount theaters. Well, oftentimes, like Landmark's the big gorilla in this space. So if Landmark says, yeah, we'll take your movie, then they have, I've not played it at an Alamo Drafthouse. I've given them the berth to get it, play it, take it off screen, and if we have an Alamo in the market, we'll play it second. We'll play it in line after Landmark. So I think I'm still in good legal standing. But you can, I think Indie Game the movie had some really great theatrical successes. They did all their theatrical booking themselves. So they kept costs really low, didn't do a lot of spend for PR and marketing. They just engaged the community, and they also went on tour with the film, which I think is really, really, really important. You just go on the road. Like an event with a filmmaker in attendance is great. One step down from that is an event with a Skype Q&A with the director. Those are things that can spur on additional theatrical revenues. But it's almost like theatrical is a lost leader unless the movie breaks out. We've had a few films that have had decent success theatrically, but we get about 35% of the revenue back. Like the theater takes 60 to 65% in the independent film space. So even if it makes $500,000, we're automatically down to 35% of that, and then the expenses of PR. So it's a real razor-thin margin. And unfortunately, the filmmaker doesn't. It's just the expenses are real. The filmmaker doesn't share in those, unless it's a big hit.
This will be the last question.
Well, I'm really glad I got to ask the last question. Great presentation. But the one thing I'm actually a little surprised you haven't talked about is the big debate in our industry about day and date VOD with theatrical.
Sure.
And if you could address that, particularly with respect to the kind of indie niche film space we're in. Mm-hmm. And I'm also really interested to know whether you apply your policy, whatever it is, to your own theaters, the way Landmark doesn't, with their distribution, arm. And where you think it's going.
Yeah, this is a really tough one, right? Because I am on both sides of the fence here, and I understand where the exhibitors are on this issue in terms of not wanting to play day and date, because I think it's sort of they see it as if we give way on the independent space, then the studios are next. The big studios are next. And even the big studios, like Tower Heist, I remember, was one where Universal was going to try to take it out day and date, and the backlash against it was intense. And so the reality is the big three, Cinemark, Regal, AMC, they control 80% of the screens in the United States. They're not going to flinch. They're not going to budge. Landmark doesn't play any day and date except for their select Magnolia titles and maybe a couple of IFC titles, which they have a tangential relationship with. Honestly, it pisses me off because it's the independent space is really hard. I play day and date and ultra VOD titles at the theater chain all the time. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter to me at all whether it's a VOD, whether it's our own title, whether it's somebody else's title. We do the same thing like as we're acquiring a film. Are we going to make money on this film? Is there a market for this film? It's like 75% of America has never transacted in the VOD space. It's not a problem in independent film to have that model. But on the flip side of that is that it's VOD going for a VOD day and date or ultra VOD launch. It doesn't mean you're going to make a ton of money on VOD. Most often you're not. You're going to make less than $100,000. And so the way we look at it for our own titles is, does this movie have the potential for theatrical revenue and exposure? Can we get it out there? If it does, then we'll play it theatrically and do a traditional release. If it's a really hard film that's really niche and, you know, Landmark and, you know, Laemmle's and a few other bigger players just aren't interested in it, there's no reason for us to go theatrical because we'll make, you know, less than $100,000 on theatrical. So we might as well gamble on iTunes and VOD and give it a go, especially if it hits the buttons that they're looking for, you know, horror, science fiction, you know, not necessarily documentary. So it's complicated. It's sad and depressing that more folks aren't willing to experiment with release windows in the independent space specifically, because they should, because it doesn't impact your theatrical at all, that we've found. We've done it a lot. You know, sometimes these movies work, sometimes they don't, but it's not a function of whether it's on VOD. So, and you know, to be able to compress a window and do a PR and marketing campaign on a very limited budget makes a ton of sense for an independent film. So, I don't know. You got to build your own model every time you have a film that comes out and make the right strategy for it. We're very flexible and agnostic, really, about how we do it. You see, this is that thing. It's like I have no earthly idea. I don't. I mean, you know, frankly, I think that cable is in a little bit of trouble. You know, just the move of HBO to say that you can take HBO Go as a separate entity away from your cable subscription is massive. Yeah, that's a shockwave. Because I think they were hamstringed, they weren't able to do that. I bet you, I don't know the percentages, there's got to be a big amount of people that the only reason that they have their cable service anymore is because they want to watch Game of Thrones. And so, and they, you know, so I don't know. I mean, I feel everything moving towards the online space. You know, there's a lot of activity in subscription services, you know, similar to Netflix, whereas you get niche audiences, you pay $6 and you get unlimited watching of this particular catalog. You know, it's happening in the sports space for sure. So I think that's more of where it's going. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know if VOD will continue. It might be one of those things like the DVD industry, which is still strong, is still a very, very viable part of our overall financial picture, but it's obviously shrinking, you know, and I would have to guess that online, cloud-based, and subscription is probably going to outpace the growth of VOD. But I don't know. I don't know. I'll leave it there. I don't know anything. Thanks, everybody.